All right, hello everyone, and welcome to the Marshall W. Allworth Planetarium. My name is Jessica, and I am the director and will be your tour guide to the stars this evening. You've also met Ben and Ted, two of our students. So for our show tonight, since it is the first Wednesday of the month, we are doing our Exploring the Monthly Sky show, where we're going to take a look at the July sky, and I'll tell you what things you can find up this month. Now, if at any time during the show you need to leave, you are welcome to do so. You'll just exit through the same door you came in. Just, of course, be careful since it does get dark in here, but that is why we have the glow strips around the edge of the wall to help you find your way out. And also, if you have any questions throughout the show, feel free to ask. I can't always see hands from the back since I sit at the computer at the back. So you're welcome to just ask your question out loud. If you're not comfortable doing that, you can always come talk to me after the show. All right, that's it for now. I'm gonna head to the back and we'll get started. All right. So starting us out this evening, we are looking at the sky right now, or at least a nice simulated sky of right now. We still have our sun up over in the west since we are just past the June solstice, which is the longest day of the year for us in the northern hemisphere. We are still having pretty long days, the sun's staying up for a pretty long amount of time. And so what we're going to do first is just kind of fast forward time until just at sunset, because there's a couple of things to be looking out for at sunset this month. But as we fast forward and the sun sets down in the northwest, let me go ahead and remove these clouds. And right over here in the west, just after sunset, we can see two planets peeking out behind the sun. Right now, at the beginning of the month, they're still going to be pretty low to the horizon and a little bit hard to see. But as we get further into the month, both Mercury and Venus are going to move further from the sun, making them easier to see, and they'll be out for a little bit longer after sunset. So that's your first thing to look out for this month. Over in the west at sunset, we can see Mercury and Venus. Venus will be pretty bright. It should be like the first thing you start seeing once it gets dark. That's why it's often called either the evening star or the morning star, depending on which time of day we're seeing it. Mercury can be a little bit trickier, but the best time to see Mercury will actually be around July 22nd. That's when it's going to be the furthest from the sun, giving us the best chance at seeing it. All right. After this, let's go ahead and fast forward time once again until we get to a nice dark sky. Now, for our summer months, that's going to take us a little bit later into the night. Even if you go out viewing earlier than this, you will still see pretty much what we're going to talk about this evening. It might just be in a slightly different location, but for the purposes of the show, we're going to go pretty far into the evening until we get our first bit of true darkness. We have no more sunlight reaching out over in the west. We are in nice darkness. And on these dark nights, looking up, we can see usually a couple thousand stars if you're at a location that is, away from city lights, away from what we call light pollution. And as you look at these stars, you may start to see patterns in them. And of course, these patterns are what we refer to as constellations. So I want to kind of show you some of the more prominent, easy to find constellations that will be out this month. And we'll start in the north. Now, the north is a pretty good place to start if you're just learning constellations or wanting to learn how to navigate the night sky. And that's because there is a pretty big section in the north encompassed by this circle right here, where these stars within this circle are what we call circumpolar stars. So they are up all year round. So they will always be there for you to find, which is why they're a great starting point. But we will begin with 7 bright stars that are kind of hanging out in the northwest. And here they are turned on, our 7 bright stars, which make up the Big Dipper. Now, the Big Dipper itself is not a constellation. It's an asterism. So that means it is a smaller, more recognizable group of stars that's part of a larger constellation. In this case, the Big Dipper is the 7 brightest stars in the Greek constellation of Ursa Major. So I'm going to turn Ursa Major on, the Big Bear. We can see there are some extra stars in it. The handle of our Big Dipper is the tail of our bear. The cup of the Big Dipper makes part of the body. And then those extra stars are the rest of the body, the legs, and the head. And I'll go ahead and turn on some art to help us see our Big Bear here in the northwest a little bit better. Now, of course, if we have a Big Dipper and a Big Bear, it makes sense that we must also have a Little Dipper and a Little Bear. Now, the Little Dipper itself is harder to find because the stars just aren't as bright. So here's the trick. We're going to use the Big Dipper to help us. So we're going to find the Big Dipper. We're going to go back to, we're going to find the front 2 stars in the cup of the Dipper. And those are our pointer stars, because if we follow them in a line, they point us across to this bright star here named Polaris. You might know it as the North Star. And we're finding that because that is the end of the handle of the Little Dipper. So again, to find our North Star and then find the Little Dipper, we first find the Big Dipper. We go to those front 2 stars in the cup, and they point us across to Polaris, the North Star, which is the end of the handle of the Little Dipper. So here is the rest of the Little Dipper. There are 7 stars in it, just like the Big Dipper. But if you are struggling to see more than about 3 of them, that is perfectly normal. As I said, the stars in the Little Dipper aren't as bright as those in the Big Dipper, and that makes them just harder to see. You have to have really dark skies, really well dark adapted eyes. It just, it's a little trickier. Now, our Little Dipper is also our Little Bear, and there are no extra stars in this case. Instead, the handle of the Little Dipper is the tail of our Little Bear, and the cup of the Little Dipper is the body of our Little Bear. So there are our 2 great bears up in the north. Now, you may be wondering, why are we calling these bears? Because bears certainly don't have long tails, right? They have stubby little tails. There is an explanation for this. You see, when Zeus went to go put these bears up in the night sky, the best way he could do that was by picking them up by their tail and swinging them around and flinging them into the night sky. And since they got kind of swung around by their tail, that stretched out that bear tail. And so that's why our bears in the sky have these unusually long tails. All right. So there are 2 more constellations here in the north that I want to show you before we look to a different part of the sky. For our next one, we're going to look for kind of a line of stars that's in between our Big Bear and Little Bear, because that line of stars is the start of the tail of Draco the dragon. And he kind of winds his way up around the sky with his head right up here. And he is currently in battle with another constellation who we'll meet in a little bit. But then the last kind of northern constellation that I want to show you is if we take those pointer stars again and we go past Polaris and then kind of start arcing back down, we'll reach this big W in the sky. This W is the Queen Cassiopeia. Now, it can take a little bit of imagination to turn a W into a queen, so let me kind of show you how this program draws it. Usually the depictions you'll see will be she'll be sitting in a throne of some sort, and so the W is kind of like her silhouette sitting in the throne. But depending on which art you're looking at, it may draw it a little bit differently, and that's because there is no one right or correct way of drawing these or interpreting these. So kind of just, do what works best for you and your imagination. All right. What we're going to do now, now that we have covered the kind of major constellations up in the north, we're going to turn to a different part of the sky. Now, if we were outside, we would simply we'd simply just turn around, right? But I want to have to ask you to do that. So I'm going to move the sky for us and move us to look over in the southwest. There we go. All right. So looking over here in the southwest, we're seeing kind of the remnants of our late spring constellations. Since we are heading into summer, already kind of into summer, our spring constellations are starting to be, a little bit more in the west. To find our first constellation, we're actually going to use the Big Dipper again. Now, since we're looking at a different part of the sky, the Big Dipper is moved. It's now over on your right. And this time, instead of using these pointer stars, we're actually going to use the handle of the Big Dipper. Now, you may notice that the handle is curved or arced. What we're going to do is we're going to follow the arc of that handle, and it's going to lead us to this bright star here, which is named Arcturus. So the saying is, you arc to Arcturus. Arcturus is a pretty bright star. You'll see it very easily in the night sky. And it is part of the constellation of Boötes. Now, Boötes here gets a bit of a reputation. I really like using this one as kind of an imagination test. So now that we see the constellation of Boötes, I just want you to think for a few seconds, like, what do you think this constellation could possibly be? And if you'd like to share it, I'd love to hear it, but you do not have to. A flying. Okay, I haven't heard that one before. I like it. One that we will often get and that most people will say is a kite. It does kind of look like a kite there. My personal favorite, I think it looks like an ice cream cone. Definitely getting into the right time of year for that one. Although my new favorite, I think, is one that we had a little boy about a month ago. He said it looks like one of those giant turkey legs that you eat at like the fair. All of those are fantastic. I love them. But I guarantee you're not going to guess what this actually is. Boötes is a man. So I know the art does the best it can to draw a man here. I kind of picture him instead of how this is doing, but like we have his shoulders and then like his skinny little legs. So he's shaped more like Kingpin from Into the Spider-Verse. But yeah, that is our weirdly drumstick-shaped man named Boötes. All right. Now, right next to Boötes is a constellation that does actually look like you would think. Right next to Boötes is this U shape. And this is Corona Borealis, or the Northern Crown. Now, albeit this maybe looks a little bit more like a tiara than a crown, but after the last constellation, I think we're going to cut them some slack here. And I really love the story of the Northern Crown. It was made by the blacksmith god for his bride for their wedding day. And he was just, after the fact, so happy that he wanted to put the crown up into the night sky so that he could remember that day forever. And so each of the stars in the crown is actually a jewel in the crown. And this bright star, the brightest star in the constellation, is named Gemma, which is based on the Latin name for gems and gemstones and kind of where that comes from. All right, one more constellation here in the southwest. He sits, again, right next to our crown. If we kind of keep going in that direction, we will meet our hero, Hercules. Now, Hercules, from our point of view right now, is upside down. Although this art does show him upside down. Okay, so he's upside down. So we kind of see his body and arms and legs here. He might look like he's flailing, but he's not. He's mid-combat doing some awesome ninja rolls as he battles Draco the dragon. So you may be familiar with the character of Hercules. He is a demigod, so he's half god, and that means he gets powers. In the case of Hercules, his powers are super strength. Now, growing up, he didn't always know how to control these powers. So he would often accidentally break things and get in trouble and just didn't get a good name for himself. But he was sad about that because he is actually a good guy and he wanted to prove that to people. So he was told that if he completes these 12 tasks, which we now know as the 12 labors of Hercules, if he completes these 12 tasks, he will show that he is, in fact, a good person. Now, one of these tasks is to retrieve a golden apple from one very special tree. But that tree is guarded by Draco the dragon. So what we're seeing here is that story playing out. We're seeing Hercules fighting Draco so that he can get to the tree, get that apple, and complete the first of his 12 tasks. Now, the reason that I really like Hercules is because there's something really cool inside of the constellation. So from our viewpoint right now, on his right side, about halfway between these two stars, if you have really good vision and a really dark sky, you might notice a little blob here. You probably won't, though. Here sits what's known as the Great Globular Cluster of Hercules. Now, again, this is something that ideally you would need a pair of binoculars or a small telescope to see. And if you have that, this is the sight that you will be greeted with. This is a globular cluster. This is a group of stars with tens of thousands of stars in it, and they're all packed really close together. And because there's so many stars packed so close together, when you look at this star cluster, it kind of shimmers. Some of my students in the past have described it as like someone blew a puff of glitter into the eyepiece of the telescope. I think it looks like little glittering jewels. Either way, it is gorgeous to look at and absolutely one of my favorite spring and summer telescope objects. All right, well, let's venture on to a different part of the sky. We're going to head on over to the south now. And as we look to the south, you will notice very bright and prominently this hazy arch or band across the sky. And that is, of course, our Milky Way galaxy. Now, our galaxy has a couple 100 billion stars in it. It's shaped like a disc or like a frisbee. And most of the stars in our galaxy are too far away for us to see as nice little pinpoints. So instead, all of that light kind of blurs together, giving us this nice haziness. And it's in a band since our galaxy is a disk. Now, during the summer, it is the absolute best time to go out and look at the Milky Way in the night sky. Because during the summer, facing south, you're actually looking into the center of our galaxy, where most of the stuff is. So you get a very bright, beautiful display during the summer. And so I encourage you, if you have not seen the Milky Way with your eyes, take a clear evening, get out of the city, go to a dark spot, and go look at the summer Milky Way, because it is stunning and something that I think everyone should get a chance to see. And while you're looking south at the Milky Way this summer, you can also search for a couple of constellations. Now, to the westward side of the Milky Way, you'll notice that there is kind of a sideways T shape. That is part of the body of Scorpius, the scorpion. So here is our scorpion here. We've got kind of his head and body, and his tail kind of dips down below the horizon a little bit. Let me turn on the art here so you can see that a little bit better. There is our scorpion. And fun fact, does anyone here know the movie Moana? Yeah? Great movie if you haven't seen it. Now, one of the things she learns while she is learning to sail is how to navigate. And she is taught by Maui. And Maui, of course, has his hook. And she learns how to use the constellation of Maui's hook to navigate. That is a real constellation. Instead of seeing a scorpion like the Greeks saw, the Polynesians, so this part of the stars, that is the hooked tail of the scorpion, they saw that as Maui's hook. So it is a real constellation and something that was actually used by Polynesian navigators. All right, on the opposite side of the Milky Way sits one of my favorite asterisms. We have the little teapot. And it does actually look like a teapot, right? We have like the body, the handle, the lid, and the spout. And you can think of the Milky Way as like the steam coming out of the teapot. It's super cute, and I love it. But it is an asterism, so that means it's a part of a larger constellation. And the constellation that the teapot is a part of is Sagittarius. Now, Sagittarius is a centaur. How you go from a teapot to a centaur, I still struggle with. And so we can see how it's drawn here. They tend to use this curve as like the bow that the centaur is holding. But yeah, teapot, centaur, definitely love the teapot. Struggle with the centaur a little bit. Okay, so for our last little bit of our July sky, I'm going to turn us over to the east for our last three constellations. Now, in the summer, if you look high up in the sky, you will see three bright stars that make what's known as the summer triangle, since it's a triangle shape that you see in the summer. Super clever name. So this is the summer triangle. We start way up high with the star Vega. Then we have the star Deneb and the star Altair. And this makes our summer triangle. And each of these three stars is in a constellation of its own. So we'll start with Vega. Vega is in the constellation of Lyra the Lyre, or Lyra the Harp. There's a couple of different ways that you can draw it. I tend to draw it as like, this is like the frame of the harp, and then the strings kind of go this way. The way other people draw it is like what we have here in the system, where we have kind of like a handle, and then this is like the frame, and the strings would go in here. Either way, we have a lyre, which is basically an early stringed instrument, kind of like a harp. If you do have, again, a pair of binoculars or a small telescope, there's another really great telescope object that you can find in Lyra. So right down here in between these two stars at the bottom sits what's known as the Ring Nebula. And it's called that because it literally looks like a ring. This is what we call a planetary nebula. So this is the result of the death of a small star. Our sun is going to become something like this in about 5 billion years. But it's a pretty cool little thing to see. It looks kind of like a little smoke ring in a telescope. But it can be, a little bit, it can be easier to find than some other objects since it's right in between those two stars in Lyra there. All right, heading down to Altair. That is part of the constellation of Aquila the Eagle. Now, in this version, I think it looks a bit more like a stingray than an eagle. But you can kind of see, the wings and then like the body of the eagle here. In this depiction, we can see that the eagle is carrying someone. This is one of the many stories that are associated with Aquila the Eagle. In this case, he was sent to fetch a man named Ganymede, who was brought up to Mount Olympus to live with the gods, and he became the cupbearer for the gods, or the water bearer. And he is actually who Aquarius, the constellation Aquarius, is named or made after. That is Ganymede. All right. Let's see here. So next up is the star Deneb. It is part of another asterism called the Northern Cross. You may have heard of the Southern Cross, but there is a Northern Cross. But that is just a portion of the constellation of Cygnus the Swan. And this one does kind of look right. We got a little tail feathers, wings, and then the long swan neck there. If you're up for a little bit more of a telescope challenge, in between our eagle and our swan sits the Dumbbell Nebula, which is actually another planetary nebula. Like the ring, this one is just shaped more like a dumbbell. All right. And the last thing that I like to point out in Cygnus the Swan is its little beak star right here. This is a star named Albireo. It literally means the beak, or the tip of the beak, or something like that. And I really like pointing this one out because it's a fun one to also look at through, binoculars or telescope, because to our eyes, we see just one star. But when we look at it through something like a telescope, we can actually see that there are two stars there. And you'll notice that the two stars do actually have different colors. One is a bit more orange, and the other is about a bit more blue-white. And that's because these two stars are different temperatures. And so the temperature of a star determines the color as we see it, with cooler stars being more reddish-orange and hotter stars being more blue-white. And so you get a great example of that with the star Albireo. All right, well, that is our July sky and the very prominent constellations and other fun things that you can find up. I'm going to go a little bit further into the night because you can see that around midnight we start getting some more planets up. We get Saturn and then Neptune. Saturn will be visible earlier and earlier in the night as we go through the month. Neptune trails not far behind, but you can't see this one with your eye. Neptune, you cannot see with your eyes. You do have to have binoculars or a telescope. And then as we keep going, right before the sun rises over in the east, we get a few more planets. We get Mars, Jupiter, and Uranus. Again, all three of these are going to be moving further away from the sun, rising earlier and earlier in the early mornings, so that we can see them a little bit sooner and for a little bit longer. And then for tonight, the moon is trailing not far behind these guys. Although the moon's position moves pretty quickly from night to night. So we're heading into the new moon not long from now. And if you are a fan of the full moon, our next full moon will be on July 21st. All right, with that, I'm going to let the sun continue to rise, bringing us back into the daytime and to the end of our show. And so with that, I will slowly bring our lights up. Now, before you all head out, out in front of the TV at the main entrance, there are some star charts. You are welcome to take one of those with you to help you find all of these things we talked about here this evening. There's also some other fun goodies there, including some awesome stickers you're welcome to take. If you have any questions, I will be back here. You can always come talk to me. Otherwise, again, thank you so much for coming out. I hope you enjoyed the show. Have a safe trip home and a wonderful holiday weekend.